Now, Krishna also says that there are different types of sacrifice that one can engage in. Just like you have good, better, best. Best is higher than good, good is higher than better, and so on. So there are many different types of sacrifices that one can execute. Of course, the goal of all these sacrifices must be to understand the Supreme Lord. You understand? That must be the goal. The goal must be to understand the Supreme Lord. The goal must be to free oneself from the cycle of birth and death. That should not be compromised, and that cannot be overlooked. So Krishna says that there are some yogis who worship the demigods. Of course, they worship the demigods for material gain. And there are also some who take to the impersonal process. That is, they want to merge into the effulgence of the Lord. And they are the brahmacharis. Just like I said, there are different social and spiritual orders. The brahmacharis, they control the hearing process and the mind. The brahmachari must control the mind, because without controlling the mind, you cannot have success in life. This is also a point that we've already discussed. And even those who are in the household or ashram, grihasthas like all of you are, they must also regulate their senses. In other words, just because somebody is in the household or ashram does not mean that he does not have to regulate the senses. Just because one is in the household situation does not mean that he has a license for doing anything that he wants without any guidelines or restrictions. So Krishna has made the point that there are different types of sacrifices. Somebody may worship the demigod. Then somebody may want to work on the impersonal process of self-realization. Then you may have the brahmacharis who will control the mind and the hearing process. Hear the names of the Lord. Then you have the householders. They will regulate their senses. Now living with a wife, children, and so on, they believe that the senses must be regulated. And so by having these different sacrifices, one can gradually make advancement. For example, there is Drava Yajna. There are some who sacrifice their possessions. They give money in charity, for example. The rich people like sacrificing their possessions. They'll give money in charity to a sadhu. There are some who like performing austerities. You may not be able to give in sacrifices because you don't have that much. You may not be able to give your possessions, but you may be willing to perform austerities. Then there are different forms of yoga, the Eightfold Yoga system. And there are some who just read the Vedas, like you have the Pandits, they just read the Vedas to try and obtain knowledge. So there are different types of sacrifices that one can perform. Then you have the pranayama. That is, you control the breathing process. Of course, even the controlling of the breathing process is not so that you get a healthy body for sense pleasure, but ultimately it is to make spiritual advancement. So Krishna is saying that there are different types of sacrifice that one can perform in order to become cleansed of sinful activities. But all these sacrifices must culminate in or must lead to knowledge. And this knowledge must ultimately result in renunciation. You understand? If the purpose of sacrifice is not the development of knowledge, if the purpose of sacrifice is not the ultimate development of renunciation, then these sacrifices are useless. Just like, for example, in the Western countries, people are so health conscious that they go jogging. They'll go jogging at 6 o'clock in the morning. They won't come to the temple, but they'll go jogging. But they'll go jogging because they're very health conscious. They know that without good health you can't have sense enjoyment. Or people may perform austerities. But if the goal of austerity is not the development of transcendental knowledge, which leads to the development of renunciation, then it is just useless. So Krishna says, Nayam lokasa agya gyasa kutanya kuru satama. Arjuna, Nobody can live without sacrifice happily. So you cannot live happily without sacrifice, either in this life or the next life. In other words, thou, we abstain from sacrifice. Thou, we are scared of sacrifice. Thou, we are scared of following the principles of religion. Actually, Krishna has very boldly stated that without sacrifice, the living entity can never be happy. And Krishna also says that all these different types of sacrifice are mentioned in the Vedas. Therefore, we must develop the mood of sacrifice according to the Vedas, and then one will be able to acquire this transcendental knowledge. So, there are different sacrifices depending upon the mood of the performer. If the mood is to develop transcendental knowledge, it's just like there's a saying, you get what you pay for, isn't it? Every businessman knows that phrase. You get what you pay for. When somebody comes to buy something, you tell him there's a high price, good commodity, isn't it? So, the different types of sacrifice, you can sacrifice the breathing process, pranayam, you can do the eightfold yoga system, you can cultivate knowledge, you can give your possessions away, you can practice austerities, you can practice mind control, you can practice regulated sense enjoyment. There are all these different types of sacrifices which are mentioned in the 4th chapter, but we must understand that all these different sacrifices are for that one goal, development of transcendental knowledge.